Hello everybody, welcome back. Hopefully you're doing great and you're ready for one more exciting video. So in this video we are going to be extending our application a bit. We're going to be adding a new entity. So my goal of this video is to try to see how long does it take to add new entity and how complicated it is. I know that it's really simple, I just want to show it to you. So as you may remember, in the previous videos we have been focused on the user entity. We have been doing all of the user stuff, we have prepared everything for it. So now it should be relatively simple to add just an extra entity. One that we are going to be adding now is going to be named object type. Do not worry much about it, just think of it as an entity, and later on in some next video I'm going to explain how are we going to use it. So the object type entity will be quite simple. It will have just one property in addition to our base properties, which will be the name. Maybe you already recognize an issue here is that our user entity already has a name, and maybe we would not want to duplicate this code. So in order to avoid that, we are going to create another mapped superclass, which will be just for the name. So in the distributed entity, you can see that we are using this mapped superclass annotation. That's what I'm talking about. So we're going to create a new class. Let's name it named entity. And it's going to be an abstract class, and it's going to be extending the distributed entity. Exactly. And it's going to be annotated with @mapped superclass. We'll have only one property, which will be the name that we are talking about. So private string name. And we are going to create getters and setters for this name. Now that we have it, we can just go to our user entity, and we can say that now the user entity extends the named entity. And we can get rid of the name property that we had here at the user because it's not really needed anymore. Perfect. Now that we got that out of the way, we can now create our new entity. Let's name it object type. And let's annotate it with @entity so that Spring knows what it is. And we are going to extend the named entity. Perfect. That's it. It doesn't have any other properties. So this will be it for now. So the next step is to add the DTO. We are going to be creating our object type DTO, and the object type DTO is going to extend the name DTO. We do not have to do any changes to our DTOs because we already have exactly the same setup. So we have our base and we have the name DTO, which has the name property. Perfect. Now we are going to create a converter for it. We are going to name it object type converter, object type DTO converter, and this class will extend the abstract DTO converter, which takes in the object type entity, and the object type DTO is annotated with component so that Spring knows what it is. We're going to implement our convert method, and in the convert method we're going to create new object type DTO. We're going to name it DTO. We are going to make it final, and from our superclass we're going to use our superclass to set all of the base entities because we already have that implemented. All we need to do is call super.convert and pass in the entity and the DTO that we just created. Perfect. And now all that's left is return the DTO. What's with the double? It really wants to go. So we also need to set the name on the DTO. So we're going to get the name from the entity and just set it. So this is everything. We do not need to do anything else here. So with that being done, we can now move to the API. In the API, we are going to create a new interface, name it object type API, and the object type API is going to extend the abstract CRUDL API, which again takes in an entity, which is the object type in our case, and the DTO, which is the object type DTO. Again, we do not have to do anything else here. Now we move on to the controller. It doesn't really matter in which order you do these things, so I'm just going whatever I see first. So we're going to create an object type controller, and the object type controller is going to extend the abstract CRUDL controller, which takes in an entity, in our case object type, and the DTO, in our case object type DTO. It's going to be annotated with a REST controller annotation and request mapping annotation, where we need to specify our endpoint. We had /API/users before, so now we are going to have /API/object types. Perfect. With that being done, we need to create a constructor, and the constructor requires one thing, and that's an API, which we already have because we created it. So it's going to be final object type API, and we're going to pass it in. And of course, we're going to add our auto-wired annotation so that we can inject the API that we created. Okay, now let's create a repository. So the repository is again an interface, and it's an object type repository, and this repository extends the distributed one, and distributed one takes in an object type entity, and we annotate it with repository annotation. Perfect. Now all that's left is to create a service. So this is the last step. We are going to create an object type service, and we are going to annotate it with add service, and the object type service is going to extend our abstract CRUDL service, which takes in an object type entity and the object type DTO, and it is going to implement our object type API. Okay, now we have to implement some methods, which is the update entity method, and in the update entity we just need to update our entity, which is really clear, and we're going to set just the name because everything else is already done in the abstract CRUDL service. And the last thing is to create a constructor, and the constructor needs a repository and it needs a converter. So the repository that has the type object type is our repository that we just created. So it's going to be final object type repository. Now, okay, great. And we are going to take the converter that we also created previously, which is the object type DTO converter. Perfect. With Control-Alt-O, we can get rid of all of the unused annotations. And now we annotate our constructor with auto-wire so that we can inject the repository and our converter component. Perfect. With that being done, all that's needed is to start our application. Hopefully the object type entity, so it will be created, so the table will be created, and we should be able to see it if we go to the workbench, and if we refresh we should see object type, and if we select it we can see what the properties it has. So it has an ID, it has a created timestamp, modified timestamp, and the name. You can also go to the alter table and then you can see all of the properties and their types. Perfect. So let's use our Postman to create an entity. So we are going to go to the localhost 8080/API/object types, and in the body we are going to pass in the name. So all of the other properties should be auto created for us. So if we create it, you can see that it has an ID 2, and the name is the building which we sent, and it has a created timestamp, and a modified timestamp. So if we go back to the workbench and we select all of the rows from the table, you can see that it has ID 2, created, modified, and the name that we created. The ID is 2 because I was already retrying this before, so I already wasted the ID 2. So if we again and execute this request again, we would get ID 3 and so on. Hopefully everything is clear, and we did make it in time, so less than 10 minutes. This was really fast. It's super easy to extend it. Hopefully you understand it. If you have any questions regarding this, now is the time to ask. So at this point we are going to start to move to more, let's say, advanced things. So at this moment we have our base set up. We are able to add entities really fast. So if you have any questions, if something is not clear, please do ask and I will try to explain it. So as always, like this video and subscribe to my channels for more future videos, and of course always ask questions, ask if something is not clear, and I will try to help you. So we see each other in the next videos.